Hi everyone, welcome to our first podcast of the development unit. Today we're going to focus on physical development. So we're going to look at development in a couple different ways. We're going to look at physical, cognitive, and then social. And then we'll talk about some special topics in development like gender and other things. Okay, so today is physical development. So we're going to go all the way from in the womb to the tomb, womb to tomb, right? All right, let's see what we got. So, like I said, what is development? It involves the processes and stages of growth from the lifespan, okay? So we're going to do physical, we're going to do cognitive, and we're going to do social. Okay, a couple of things before we start. In development, there's a couple of major questions that psychologists wonder, right? So the first one we've kind of already talked about is the gene, the nature, nurture, right? So we wonder a lot in human development, as humans develop from the womb to the tomb, how much of it is our genes and how much of it is in our environment? Another question we ask is that does development happen gradually or does it happen in stages? Like, is it a set stage and then when you hit this age you do this and then this age you do this and this age you do this? And this is kind of how we view it in our society because it's like 18, 21, right, whatever, 16 for driving. Or is it more gradual where it doesn't happen at a certain stage for everyone? And then the last question we wonder about in development is stability versus change. So, do you stay the same person throughout your life, or as you age, do you become different and pick up different traits? Okay, so physical development. All right, prenatal, right, starting in the womb. So before you're even born, right, we have got the zygote. This is a fertilized egg, right? Then we've got the embryo, and last but not least, we have the fetus, okay? And of course, as you're developing, right, during each week, more and more parts of you are becoming, developed and finalized. And, being in the womb, right, is a very sensitive time period, okay, because all of the most important parts of you are developing. And so psychologists, really focus on this time period in terms of, like, what things can harm the baby while it is in utero. Okay, so one of the major things that we talk about when we talk about in the baby being in utero are these things called teratogens. All right, that's how you say that. All right, teratogens, and teratogens are chemicals or viruses that actually get into the placenta, like get through the placenta and harm the fetus. Okay, these can come from a variety of things. Okay, caffeine is a teratogen, alcohol, drugs, aspirin. We can say like sushi is a teratogen. There's a couple of different things that you're not supposed to eat or drink when you're pregnant because those things can actually harm the fetus. Okay, one of the most common teratogens, that is like kind of controversial is alcohol because it's thought of that alcohol causes fetal alcohol syndrome, which is, actually what happens is the neurons, as they're going to their final destination in your brain, they actually don't ever go to the final destination, they go past it. So instead of stopping at the occipital lobe, they just keep going. And this causes them to be in the wrong place so they don't work as efficiently. And it's birth defects and mental retardation. And, there's a little bit of controversy over whether or not actually how much alcohol, is any alcohol safe, those kinds of things in terms of your prenatal development. Okay, so this is when your body is most sensitive. So if you look at this chart, right, in the red, right, that's when it's very sensitive. So your central nervous system is developing all of this time, right, and that's when it's very sensitive to, any teratogens, right. And if we look here, the heart is most sensitive right before week 7. Upper limbs, week 5. The eyes are most sensitive until week 8. So at certain points, teratogens can affect certain things. If a woman takes or has, a drink of alcohol in the 9th week, it's going to affect different things than if she has it in the 5th week. Okay. All right, so when infants are born, right, they are born with some skills, okay? So you're born with all of the neurons you're ever going to have in your entire body, but that doesn't mean that the growth between the neurons is complete, all right? So you're born with some skills, but your neurons are growing very rapidly when you're an infant, and that's what's giving you those other developing skills. So infants are born with a lot of reflexes, okay? They're born with a sucking reflex. That's this right here. So if you stick your finger in their mouth, right, they will suck on it. They're born with a rooting reflex. That's this one over here, right? And that's like if you touch their cheek, they'll turn their mouth to the side and open it. They're looking to breastfeed. The grasping reflex. That's this one right here, right? Okay. And this is actually called the Moro reflex, and we'll talk a little bit about that, where you, like, if you drop them, they'll, like, kind of flinch. So I'll show you a picture of that happening. And also what happens with their toes is if you touch the toes, they'll, like, curl like this. Okay, so they're born with all of those reflexes. No one has to teach them that. Okay. Also, what are some things that infants are born with? So they're born nearsighted. They have like 2300 vision. Okay. And I'll show you a picture of what their vision kind of looks like so you can see in a minute. They prefer human voices. So they actually know through research that an infant can recognize its mom's voice, and that it prefers its mom's voice or its dad's voice over any other voice, and it prefers a human voice over like a computerized voice. Infants tend to look at face images longer. So for example, if you show an infant this and this, the infant will stare at this face over this face, which then tells us that the infant prefers this face, right? It's very interesting when you're doing research with infants because they can't talk. So we base a lot of our information on infants about what they look at and how long they look at it. And we say that that's interest. They prefer the smell of their mother to anything else. Okay, this is what an adult sees. This is what a 2-month-old sees, right? So you can tell the difference here in their vision. Okay. As you grow into childhood, right, you have this process called maturation. Maturation is the biological growth of your neurons. So literally it is your neurons growing and growing and growing and connecting, and the synapses and the dendrites and all of these things happening, right? And it leads to like an orderly change in your behavior. So basically, no matter what happens, no matter how much I lift you up when you're a baby and try to force your little feet to walk, right, you're not going to walk. You're going to crawl, you're going to walk, you're going to run, right? A baby's not going to all of a sudden go from, laying on the back to running, okay? It's natural. And nothing that you can do, anything that you can do is not going to make the baby walk before it's ready. It has to wait until the neurons and its motor cortex are fully developed and its cerebellum are developed. Remember, cerebellum, fine motor movement, motor cortex, motor movement, so that it can actually have the ability, the coordination, the balance to walk. It's kind of the same thing with potty training, right? Like you can't potty train a kid before they're ready because they have to have the neurons growth in their brain to be able to control their bladder, okay? And then maturation plus learning from the world is how you develop skills like riding a bike or writing or tying your shoes, right? Someone has to teach you those things. But you're not going to be able to tie your shoes until you can move your hands that way, okay? And what we found out is that there are critical periods of development. And these critical periods are like if you don't do something by a certain age, you'll never be able to do it, okay? So for example, if I don't ever talk to you before the age of 10, or if your language development is slow by the age of 10, you will probably never learn. This is an example of Jeannie. Jeannie was a very abused child. She was not even spoken to. She was made to sit on a potty her whole life. And when they found her, no matter how old she got, she could never learn to speak at her age because she hadn't heard any sounds. So, while you do have the ability for your neurons to grow and connect, and remember we learned you can live with half a brain, there are some things that if you don't learn them by a certain time, the brain just deletes basically those connections and you can never get them back. Okay, so adolescence, right? What does the adolescent body look like? You're going through puberty, you have all this, you guys are going through this, right? Boys have their growth spurt later. They produce live sperm in puberty. Girls have menarche, which is the medical term for they start their periods, right? You get the development of secondary sex characteristics, so pubic hair, breasts. These are things that are not necessary for reproduction, okay? And then of course we have all the unpleasant side effects, like you start to smell from you have to use deodorant and you get pimples and whatever, right? All of these things happen, and you feel all awkward in your adolescent body, okay? And it's all going on during puberty. Okay, what's going on in your brain? We talked about this too, right? So during this time, your neurons are continuing to prune, right? That means that they're continuing, if you use it or lose it. So if you're not using certain neurons, the connections are gonna start to die, right? And this seems bad, but it's actually good because the connections that are there, the myelin sheath is developing, right? And so the connections that are staying are getting more efficient, and then the other connections that you don't need are dying. So your brain is getting more efficient in adolescence. And this is where your prefrontal cortex is developing, right? Like we talked about, this is why you have a hard time with impulse control and risk-taking behavior because your critical thinking isn't developed yet. Okay, so the adult body, right? you have like a peak in your mid-20s. So it's when you have your heart is peaked, your senses are peaked, your strength is peaked, your reaction time is peaked, all of these things, right? Kind of after your mid-20s, right, which is past Miss Schaefer, because I'm an old lady, okay, you have a gradual decline. You decline in your senses, you decline in your memory, your bone density, your immune system weakens. But what they find out with especially like older people, is that their immune system is weak, so they have like a higher chance of developing something like cancer. But they also have a stronger immune system against like the common cold because they develop more antibodies. So it's like weakened, but not completely. Okay. And if you look at this chart, it tells you like this is your eyesight declining, your smell declining, and your hearing declining. Hearing is the first to decline, right? Okay, and here's some signs how you know you're a grown-up. So read and see if you're a grown-up, because I know I am. Okay, women in adulthood go through menopause in their 40s or 50s. They have hot flashes. Some of them go through depression, but it's actually kind of rare. And, menopause is actually caused by lowering of estrogen in the body. Okay, men have a gradual decline in their sperm count, and their testosterone levels decrease, and the speed of their erection decreases. Okay, so here's more signs about how you know if you're old. All right, last little bit of physical development for adults, okay? So brain cells begin to die by the end of adolescence. Like I said, they're starting to prune away, use it or lose it, right? It is very gradual. But by the age of 80, most people have lost about 5% of their brain mass. Some have more, okay? And certain things can allow you to keep more brain mass. So drugs and alcohol consumption leads to less brain mass. Tumors, less brain mass. Smoking, less brain mass. If you eat healthy, if you exercise, if you do puzzles like Sudoku and stuff, that can help keep your brain healthy and help keep the mass larger, okay? Your intelligence starts to change as you get older. So you have a larger amount of what is called crystallized intelligence. This is like the amount of knowledge you know. So the older you get, tons and tons and tons of facts because you've been around for a long time. But your fluid intelligence, that's your ability to solve problems kind of quickly and think quickly, declines. So if you see here, fluid intelligence declines, crystallized intelligence grows. Okay, and then Alzheimer's is something else that can happen to the adult brain, and it comes from the degeneration or the dying of acetylcholine producing neurons. Memory is the first thing to go with Alzheimer's, and then sometimes they stop being able to reason and think critically, and then also language can sometimes go as well. Okay, so here's a little funny picture for you, right? Grandma can knit a multicolored sweater, but she can't text, right? Because she's developed those skills over a long time, the moving of the hands and all those things. She knows how to knit, but learning something new and being able to problem solve and figure out new things, can't do it, right? You've all had your parents text, right? There's that website, When Parents Text, and they send you like 4 texts in a row, or it's all out of order and they can't figure out how to use it, okay? Right? So you know how this is. All right, that's all for now, AP Psychos, and remember, psychology is flippin' awesome.